Today, we'll be talking about something that is one of the biggest operational problems inside facilities management contracts, but it's also actually one of the easiest problems to fix. So we're talking here about unverified hours. Now, these are the hours on your timesheet where there's no reliable, defensible evidence that they were actually worked, or perhaps just no evidence that they were worked in the way that was planned. Now, if you've spent any time running facilities management operations, whether that's cleaning teams, security teams, engineering teams, or something else, you already know the exact problem I'm describing. Unverified hours are basically the gaps between what's supposed to be happening on site and what you can actually prove happened when it comes to payroll, billing, audits, client conversations. Now, in most FM operations, as much as 6% of all paid time sits in this unverified category. Sometimes it's less, maybe 2 to 3%. Sometimes it's far more, especially across more complex multi-site teams, if their processes are a bit of a mess, for example. But even at the lower end of that range, the financial impact is enormous. So for every £1 million of payroll, unverified hours typically translate into £20,000 to £60,000 of lost margin every single year, which is huge, considering most FM providers operate somewhere between 3% and 7% margin. And that's just the pure financial impact of payroll waste. We've not even factored into that the impact on client disputes, SLA risks, supervisor workload, forecasting errors, or staff retention, especially early stage retention, which is crucial in FM environments where so many FM workers quit within their first 30 days. Anyway, I'll get into that a bit later. The point for now is that in a typical FM operation, as much as 6% of paid time cannot be reliably proven, and that causes problems. So this walkthrough is about how to stop that. I'm going to explain what unverified hours actually look like inside an FM operation, why they happen, how they mess up your KPIs and your margins, and then, perhaps most importantly, what you can put in place to fix them, and normally within about 12 weeks. So if you're running dispersed FM teams and you're sick of timesheet arguments, client clawbacks, payroll wastage, then keep watching, because in this video, we're going to show you how to stop money leaking out of your contract and how to build a defensible record of every hour worked, every hour billed, and every hour paid. So let's start with the basic problem. Facilities management is one of the toughest environments for accurate time recording. You are dealing with buildings that you don't control. You've got multiple entrances and exits. You've got several floors or zones within each building. Some sites have their own access systems or sign-in sheets. You've got cleaners and engineers moving between half a dozen buildings in a single shift. And often, there's no supervisor physically present for large parts of the day or night. Now, when you put all that together, the usual ways of capturing time are always going to leak data. Manual check-ins, QR codes, mobile apps that rely on somebody remembering to tap a button, paper logs that are filled in at the end of a shift, or even GPS tracking, which sounds clever but can't reliably tell you which floor or which room someone was in. It can't even accurately tell you which building they're in sometimes. Sometimes you'll get staff gaming the system, for example, taking a picture of a QR code and checking in from somewhere else, but far more often it's just messy processes and human error. When someone is moving constantly through different buildings and zones, it's very easy to forget a check-in or to record something at the wrong time, and even well-intentioned staff make mistakes. So what do unverified hours actually look like on the ground? Think about these kinds of situations. A cleaner leaves early but forgets to clock out. The timesheet shows the full shift. It happens. Or perhaps the reverse. Someone starts their shift 15 minutes late, but the timesheet still shows 7 o'clock on the dot. Maybe a mobile cleaner travels between sites and ends up with a 40-minute gap where nobody really knows where they were. Or perhaps a maintenance engineer finishes a job later than planned, but the system still shows the scheduled completion time, not the real one, which will definitely lead to a heated discussion when the payslips get handed out. Other examples, maybe a night security guard clocks out at 6 in the morning, but the CCTV shows they left at 5:42. Or it might not be about shift start or end times at all. What if a cleaner walks into a room that's especially dirty, spends an extra half an hour in there, and now you've got a client asking why you're billing them extra? And then, of course, you've got supervisors who approve whole timesheets in one go because they don't have reliable evidence to challenge every little discrepancy. Either that, or you've got supervisors who are acting more like timesheet detectives, spending entire Fridays interrogating team members about questionable hours from the previous week. On their own, all of these are tiny differences, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, but across dozens of buildings and hundreds of shifts, they compound into a very real hit on your margin, and they matter more in facilities management than in a lot of other industries. FM contracts are built on predictable costs and defensible reporting. You're selling hours, yes, but you're also selling outcomes that are tied clearly to defined inputs and outputs. And when your hours aren't properly verified, a few things happen. Payroll leakage increases. You pay for time you can't actually verify. And because labour is already 60 to 80% of your cost base, even a small percentage error is a big financial number. Other things that happen. Billing disputes increase. Clients compare your invoices with their own access logs or their expectations of coverage, and if the numbers don't match, then they query the bill. Every dispute adds admin and delays to payment. Your productivity metrics get distorted. For example, in cleaning, a common benchmark is around 230 to 250 square meters cleaned per labour hour. That's for standard office cleaning. Now, if your timesheets are padded with unverified time, your apparent productivity drops, even if the work on the ground is as good as your biggest competitor. Your SLA risk increases. If you can't prove attendance or prove that certain tasks were completed, you've got very little to stand on when a client challenges performance. And that's risky during audits, during SLA reviews, or during retenders. And finally, you end up with operational blind spots. Without verified hours, you don't really know which buildings are overstaffed, which are understaffed, or which are just inefficient. You're making decisions based on best guesses, bad data, when you should be making decisions on reliable evidence. So let's talk about how all of this affects your metrics and your KPIs in a bit more detail. So FM leaders lean heavily on KPIs. They lean on benchmarks, they lean on industry standards, and they use these to decide whether a contract is healthy. But those numbers only work if the underlying hours are accurate. So in soft FM, that's things like cleaning, security, catering, landscaping, you'll often look at metrics such as square meters cleaned per labour hours. As I mentioned earlier, this is the core productivity metric for a cleaning team. Many UK and US contractors quote that 230 to 250 square metre range as the benchmark. If your hours include unverified time, the square metre per hour figure drops and it looks like your teams are underperforming. Labour cost as a share of the contract. So labour is the largest cost driver. Typical soft FM labour share is 60 to 75%, sometimes up to 85% in heavily manned contracts. If unverified hours creep in, the labour share rises and your margin shrinks. Attendance compliance. Most teams aim for around 95% attendance. In reality, once you factor in lateness and short notice sickness, it's often closer to 90%. That would be fine if the data was accurate, but if you can't verify arrivals and departures reliably, the percentage is almost meaningless. And measures that you take to fix attendance compliance are being taken off the back of bad data and are very likely ineffective. Staff utilisation. So this is productive hours divided by paid hours. It's a really useful internal KPI for spotting excess capacity or overstretched teams. But again, if your paid hours aren't trustworthy, your utilisation figures are basically built on nothing. Now in hard FM, that's technical, structural, engineering type of services, the metrics are a little bit different. Work order completion time. That's how long it actually takes an engineer to complete a task from start to finish. And this is a key measure of efficiency. So if jobs start and end times are logged manually or guessed after the fact, you can't rely on this metric. First time fix rate. That's another important one. So the percentage of issues resolved on the first time visit. This is hugely important in engineering contracts. If you don't know exactly how long engineers spent on site and on task, it becomes difficult to understand whether repeat visits are caused by skill gaps, access issues, or something else. Engineer utilisation is another one. Again, productive versus paid time. For mobile engineering teams, this is very sensitive to gaps in the data. So time spent waiting for access to a particular room, undocumented delays, and so on. And travel time versus job time ratio. A big chunk of a mobile engineer's day is often spent in transit, and you want to know the balance between time on the road and time on the job. But without verified building level timestamps, it's guesswork. The point in all of this is simple. If you fix the underlying time data, your KPIs suddenly become meaningful again. But if you don't, you're making decisions based on distorted numbers. And later in the video, I'll talk about the cost savings and ROI you can get from all this. But first, let's look at how you actually fix unverified hours in FM. So what doesn't work is piling more manual processes on top. So that's paper sign-in sheets, QR codes on doors, mobile apps that people have to remember to open. These tend to be reactive measures, and they all have the same weaknesses. They depend on human behavior being perfect. And in a busy FM environment, that's never going to happen. You also can't rely solely on GPS. GPS can tell you roughly where someone is outdoors, and it can be helpful for understanding whether they've reached the building or not. But it absolutely struggles inside complex multi-story buildings. It won't tell you which washroom someone cleaned or which plant room they worked in. And in some cases, it won't even tell you which building a person is in. To eliminate unverified hours, you need automatic and accurate verification of attendance and movement. In other words, you need a way of detecting where staff are, when they arrive, and when they leave, without relying on them pressing a button or scanning something. And for the odd edge case where something doesn't quite match, even when things are automated, you need a smart way of handling exceptions and escalating those exceptions where necessary. And that's so that unverified gaps are investigated right away, not 3 weeks later when payroll's already been run. And this is where Sense Workplace for FM comes in. So the platform combines wearable devices with a network of plug-and-go gateways that are placed around a building. Those devices then talk to an automation engine in the background to give you reliable real-time evidence of attendance, movement, and task completion. But let's start with what this actually looks like at a staff level. Because as I've just said, the last thing you want is a system that relies on staff remembering to sign in or scan a code. So there are two types of wearables that you can give to team members, and the first is the Sense badge. So this is the highest accuracy option, and it gives you a bit more than just location data. It's a durable device with a clean digital display. It clips onto a pocket or a belt or a bag, and inside it is a stack of high-precision indoor location technologies that can determine where somebody is inside a building with very high accuracy. It can be down to around 10 centimeters, depending on the configuration you go for. So the badge lets you automatically record shift start and end times. It verifies when someone enters specific rooms or floors. It can display and receive tasks and instructions. And it gives supervisors real-time visibility of where people are. It also allows you to find the nearest worker for ad hoc redeployment during a shift. So that's the first option. The second is the Sense tag. So this is a more simple, lower-cost device. It's a small fob with a single button and no screen. Staff will feel familiar with this type of device because it's just like the kind of thing you use to open a door. When you enter a building, you can wear it on a lanyard around your neck, you can stick it in your pocket, you can stick it in your bag. You won't be using this to send instructions to staff, but it will still do a great job of telling you where they are. So this is great for roles where you don't need detailed task verification, but you do need to know which site or even which zone someone is in. The tag confirms presence when it is detected by a gateway, and it supports basic attendance verification, gives you zone-level visibility, so that's things like entered building or on second floor or in break area. It's ideal for large cleaning teams where the tasks are predictable and repetitive, but you want reliable attendance. You don't need to push detailed tasks lists to each person because they already know what they're doing, but you do need to know where they are, whether they reached the site at the time they were meant to. So those are the options you give to your team members, the tag or the badge. Then there are the gateways. So gateways are small devices that you stick up around the building, near entrances, on each floor, in key rooms. They listen for badges and tags and send that location information back to the Sense platform using a fixed SIM card. So the beauty of this setup is that it's client-friendly. There's no complex installation into the client's IT network. You don't have to jump security hurdles like Wi-Fi access. You don't need to rewire anything. There's no installation to speak of in the traditional sense. Gateways just plug in to a regular mains socket and they do their job. They can be removed very quickly if a contract ends. Now, most FM providers find that clients are very happy to host these devices once they understand what they do. Every time a badge or a tag is detected by a gateway, That event is sent back to your central Sense Workplace console. From there, it flows into two places. So the first is your real-time presence dashboard, and this is where supervisors can see who's on site, which zones they're in, what tasks are in progress, and so on. The second is the automation engine that runs in the background. Now, this is where all your custom workflows live, and this is where you define the rules that will eliminate unverified hours. We'll go into detail on these later, but we're talking about things like when someone enters this entrance, start their shift. When they leave the building, end their shift. If there's a gap of more than 15 minutes with no presence, flag it for a supervisor. If a washroom hasn't been visited by a certain time, notify the supervisor. There's a whole bunch of automations that you can design. I'm going to show you 9 really useful ones a little bit later in this video. But the net result for unverified hours is that shift start and end times are captured automatically. Presence is verified throughout the shift, exceptions are flagged instantly, and the time data always matches what actually happens on the ground. Staff don't need to do anything. They don't need to do anything different anyway, other than carry the badge with them or carry the tag with them and get on with the job. So let's talk about what this looks like in terms of real deployments of different sizes. At a small site, let's say a branch office or a small retail unit, you might have one cleaner and an occasional supervisor who visits. Now, in that scenario, you're probably just going to install a single gateway at the entrance and give the cleaner a sense tag. That's it. When the cleaner arrives, the gateway picks up the tag and records their presence. When they leave, it records their departure. If a scheduled shift doesn't have a matching presence event, then the system flags an exception. You now have fully automatic attendance tracking with zero manual input and a very low cost footprint. It doesn't even matter if the cleaner forgets to sign in on site because you have proof that they were there. Now, at a medium site, and that's, for example, a multi-story office building with a small cleaning team and a security guard, you might install gateways at the entrances and one on each floor. You might even add one in reception or in high-value areas like toilets. Cleaners would have tags or badges depending on whether you needed task level verification or whether you just wanted to know where they were. And as far as security goes, they would probably just have a tag with the button configured for incident logging. So more on this later when I tell you about the automations. Now, in that setup, what you get is automatic shift start and end, floor level presence, and optional room level verification in key areas. At larger or more complex sites, so we're thinking here about campuses, hospital wings, university buildings, corporate headquarters, the pattern scales up. You place gateways at all main entrances, side doors and service entrances. You add gateways on every floor and in critical rooms, such as bathrooms, plant rooms, labs, kitchens, reception areas, anywhere that matters operationally or commercially. Anywhere that you need to prove was visited by a particular member of staff, you put a gateway there. So cleaners would ideally get badges in this setup rather than tags. And that's because badges allow you to send tasks and verify completion room by room. So you can see the full day of progress as it folds out. You can see how close you are to completing that day's tasks across your entire team. And you can redeploy staff dynamically. Engineers would get badges too in this situation, and that's so that you can track job level and asset level work. Security, once again, gets just the tags in this setup, and that's so that they can use the button to log incidents and mark checkpoints during patrols, and the tag will know whether they've done their patrol or not. Supervisors and FM managers would use the console and dashboards to stay on top of what's happening in the building. Now, depending on the layout, a large or complex contract like this might use 20 to 70 gateways. You don't have to place a large number of gateways at any of your deployments. But the best way to look at it is this. The more gateways you place, the richer your visibility becomes. And you don't have to over-engineer it for each site either. Many FM providers end up with 3 or maybe 4 standard deployment patterns or templates that they just reuse across their portfolio. This building looks like this one. We'll copy the same set of steps. And for small sites, that might be one gateway and a tag. For medium sites, that might be entrance gateways plus a gateway on each floor. Or for larger complex sites, you might want a full multi-gateway layout with badges for cleaners, badges for engineers, and tags for security. So that covers the hardware you need in place. And once that's done, we move on to probably the most powerful part of all this, which is the workflows that you're going to build. Now, these are the automations that actually eliminate unverified hours and remove manual admin. And the world really is your oyster in terms of what you can automate here. So if you want to get creative based on your setup, you absolutely can. But I'm going to walk you through 9 of the main automations that we use for our FM clients who are trying to eliminate unverified hours. So the first is automatic shift start and end. And that's that when somebody's badge or tag is picked up at an entrance gateway, their shift starts. When they leave, their shift ends. Early arrivals, late departures, or other unusual patterns are flagged for a review. You no longer rely on manual clock-ins and clock-outs, which are one of the biggest sources of unverified hours. Now, this is probably the automation that gives you the most results the fastest, but you can combine this with many others if you want to increase the effectiveness. So the second automation that we tend to recommend is room-level cleaning verification, or even room-level task verification. So this is for buildings where you have rooms with specific cleaning tasks allocated to them, tasks that must be completed each visit. When a cleaner with a badge walks into a room associated with scheduled tasks, their badge can show the task list for that room. When they mark a task as complete, the system records it against their presence in that room at that time. If it took far longer or far less time than expected, it can be flagged for review. So you now have proof that someone was physically present in that room at that time and that they completed the task. This is incredibly useful in disputes, audits, and service level agreement reviews. The third workflow we recommend is dynamic task lists with mid-shift reassignment. That's a bit of a mouthful. Let's say you've assigned a bunch of rooms or tasks to a cleaner, but for whatever reason, they get through them earlier than expected. You still likely have a whole bunch of people who are only partway through their own task lists. So what this workflow does is looks at what's outstanding nearby and reassigns some of those tasks to the freed up cleaner. New tasks appear on their badge and are removed from whoever was originally assigned to do them. Conversely, you can build this workflow kind of the other way around to assign the tasks of a person who is falling behind. So if someone is falling behind, you get better utilization and overall coverage by farming out some of those tasks to the staff who are maybe ahead of their jobs. And this allows better optimization on shift without adding more staff. The fourth automation that we recommend is multi-site worker routing. So this is for workers who need to attend different sites during the course of a single shift. It's quite simple. When a person leaves site A and arrives at site B, the system ends the first shift and starts the second automatically. So travel time here is captured separately, and suspiciously long gaps are flagged. This is crucial if you're paying for travel time, or for mobile cleaners who often sit at the centre of timesheet disputes. Is also useful for mobile engineers who may be turning up late to scheduled jobs due to earlier overruns. It helps you understand what's happened there. The fifth workflow we suggest is for engineers specifically and is called a job verification workflow. So when an engineer enters a technical area or starts a job on their badge, the system tracks how long they spent there and when they completed the task. If they leave and come back later, repeat visits are tracked separately. You now have asset-level labour evidence for SLAs and audits. You can also report better on metrics like first-time fix rate. So I talked earlier about incident logging and patrol verification for security. So let's see what that workflow would look like. Patrol verification is handled by tags. We don't need the badge. We just need to make sure the gateways are installed at key points on the security guard's patrol route. So this patrol verification and incident logging workflow has 2 parts to it. The first is that security staff, as they move through the key checkpoints, will have their presence logged automatically, and it will confirm that they've met their service level agreements to visit certain checkpoints throughout the day. If there are any missed checkpoints, they're flagged as exceptions. Now, the second part of this workflow is to do with incident logging. So that's when security comes across an incident or sees something that needs flagging, they can simply press the button on their tag to create a timestamp linked to that location. So that makes it far easier to pull CCTV and investigate issues with a time and a place without having to trawl through hours of footage or relying on memory as to where and when something happened. The 7th workflow we recommend is a self-verification workflow for edge cases. So if the system detects a time gap that doesn't quite make sense, for example, maybe a worker spent 17 minutes in an area that had no assigned tasks. This could just be the cleaning cupboard, but it might be something else. So the badge prompts the worker to confirm what happened in that area. Unconfirmed gaps are escalated to a supervisor for review, and repeat patterns can be flagged. So on top of that, you've got the 8th workflow, which kind of coincides, and it's the supervisor exception escalation workflow, another mouthful. So this workflow is any anomaly that can't be resolved automatically is surfaced with context. the last zone that was seen, movement timeline, any notes from the worker. So supervisors can approve, adjust, or query the shift promptly, rather than looking at it weeks later. Now, in our experience, investigating edge cases quickly like this is far more effective than trying to piece together what happened at the end of a shift or even at the end of a week. And finally, all of this can be synchronized with your CAFM or your payroll systems. So at the end of each day or shift, verified hours can be compared with what your CAFM schedule looks like, if you use one, that is, of course. Variances are flagged, approved hours then flow directly into payroll and billing, and reports can include presence-based evidence, so invoices line up clearly with reality. Once these workflows are in place, your attendance data becomes accurate. It becomes auditable and it becomes defensible. Cleaners have clear task lists and don't have to worry about proving they were somewhere. Engineers have reliable job evidence. Security has a simple way to log incidents and prove that they patrolled their routes. Supervisors spend more time managing and less time chasing misentries. And because your data is now verified, you can do far more with it, which brings me nicely onto the next thing you can do, which is AI and analytics. So when every hour is verified and every presence event is recorded, you're sitting on a huge amount of operational data. Sense Workplace is made up of more than just clever hardware with a useful dashboard and automations in the background. It has an AI layer that you can use to continuously analyze your data, spot patterns, and highlight risk areas. For example, it can identify buildings or shifts with unusually high exception rates. It can pick out teams with repeated late or missed attendance. It can show zones that routinely take longer to service than expected. It can reveal travel routes when engineers spend more time in transit than they do on jobs. It can spot security patrol gaps happening at the same times each night. Because the data is clean and consistent across your estate, you can now benchmark performance. You can benchmark it across buildings and client sites, across different shifts, day versus night, weekday versus weekend, across teams even, which combinations of people work best together, or across service lines, cleaning, security, engineer. So this helps you see which sites are performing consistently well, which ones need support, where staffing may be too high, where staffing may be too low, and where contracts might be drifting towards SLA risk. And on top of that, the AI can provide predictive alerts. This might be something like, unverified minutes at this site have increased for 3 consecutive weeks. Or maybe night shift attendance is becoming unstable. Or travel time on this engineer route now exceeds job time. These are alerts that you might not have caught using standard reports or queries on your database. And they give you early warning so you can intervene before there's a complaint or before there's an SLA breach. So Sense AI can also recommend practical actions, ways to solve these problems, such as adding a gateway where exceptions repeat themselves, breaking a large cleaning zone into smaller task lists, adjusting shift times to match building usage better, or rebalancing your engineering routes. You can feed these different insights into dashboards if you like, tailored to real facilities management workflows. So you could have a daily supervisor view, or a weekly contract review, or a monthly performance reporting view. You can create audit and re-tender packs where these insights are fed straight into these dashboards for quick use wherever you might need them. The end result is that you move from reactive firefighting to proactive management, and it's backed by reliable evidence that your clients cannot easily dispute. Let's talk briefly about the business case, because facilities management margins are thin and labour dominates your cost base. Even small improvements in verified hours have a meaningful financial return. So if you take a contract with £2 million of annual payroll and reduce unverified hours from 4% down to 1%, that's roughly £60,000 a year. That, of course, depends on things like salary levels, how many of those unverified hours actually translate to payroll leakage. But in a tight margin business, heavily skewed by labour costs, these numbers are massively important. However, when talking about return on investment, it's not just about pure payroll leakage. Across your portfolio, the ROI of eliminating unverified hours shows up in a number of categories. Reduced payroll leakage, we've talked about this one. Fewer billing disputes and credit notes, so that leads to faster payment cycles. Less supervisor admin spent chasing timesheets or trawling through CCTV footage. Better labour utilisation and coverage, as well as dynamic task allocation, and this makes your shifts more efficient without needing to add new heads. Stronger evidence for contract renewals and retenders, fewer grievances and less friction between staff and supervisors, and improved staff retention, especially in those first crucial 90 days. And actually, that last one is especially important in FM. You'll know already that many frontline facilities management roles have very high early tenure attrition. Many cleaners and security staff will leave in the first month. So when you consider that it can cost up to £3,000 to replace a single member of staff, then beating that first 30 days becomes actually very important. In fact, if you can get your new starters to the 90-day mark, they're far more likely to stick around for the longer term. Many in the industry call this the 90-day wall, and it's a key metric in terms of frontline FM retention. But why is attrition this bad in the first place? Well, that's a complex question, but we do know a lot about the answer. So sometimes it's the nature of the job. Sometimes it's personality clashes between managers and staff. But often it's because of pay issues. So that's missing hours, disputed time, feeling accused when you can't prove you were where you said you were. For a lot of workers, losing a day's pay is a serious issue. And if they don't trust the process, they won't stick around. So when you eliminate unverified hours and give staff verified proof of their own attendance, they feel protected. They know you can back them up in a client dispute, and that improves trust. And it makes those first 30 to 90 days much smoother and much more likely to happen. I've already mentioned that replacing people is expensive. Factor in recruitment, training, uniforms, lost productivity. It is a nightmare. But if you can push that early tenure retention window from 30 days out to 90 days, then churn drops and those costs fall very quickly. Right, so how do you actually implement all of this within 12 weeks? Well, you break it down into 6 phases. So weeks 1 and 2 are about baseline analysis and site mapping. You look for the last few months of payroll, you identify where unverified hours are the worst, you map your typical shift patterns, review client access constraints, and gather floor plans. You also identify critical rooms and zones, bathrooms, plant rooms, receptions, high traffic areas. From this, you decide how many gateways you need and where they should go. You also establish baseline KPIs at this stage. So that's things like current verified hours percentage, attendance compliance and utilisation, and that's so that you can later on measure the impacts that these changes have made. So weeks 3 and 4, this is phase 2, these are about installing gateways and devices. So you install the gateways at the agreed locations and you assign badges or tags to staff. You have to pair each device to a worker profile. You'll need to check connectivity, test presence across the building, but by the end of week 4, your site is effectively instrumented and you now have live presence data that flows back into the system. So the next phase, which is weeks 5 and 6, here's where you configure the workflows, i.e. you tell your system what to do with all the information it's receiving. So that means turning on your automatic shift start and end workflows, setting up room-level task verification if that's needed. You also use this time to configure multi-site routing for mobile cleaners, your job verification workflows for engineers, and your patrol verifications for security. You should use this time to set up self-verification prompts and escalation windows for supervisors, so that you're dealing with exceptions quickly, and you should also use this time to integrate with your CAFM if you use one, or with your HR or payroll systems. So weeks 5 and 6 may feel like a bit of a slog, and that's because this is where most of the heavy lifting happens. But it's also where you'll see the first big drop in unverified hours. Now, weeks 7 and 8 are all about training. So there's not much training required for the staff who just need to carry a tag or a badge around with them. But it is worth teaching your supervisors how to use the Sense Presence dashboard and how to handle exceptions effectively. You should also explain to staff why you've given them these tags or badges. Explain that it's in their interest. Show them how to work through task lists or to respond to prompts. Tell them when or why they might need to push the button on the tag. It depends what you've programmed it to do. Staff training will also involve showing your payroll or client-facing teams how to use the evidence that this system is now generating in a dispute or an audit situation. Now, you might get some resistance initially, especially from people who are used to more manual methods, but most frontline staff will quickly see the benefit of this, which is fewer disputes, less admin, and a clear way to prove that they did what they said they did. Weeks 9 and 10 are your soft rollout and adjustment phase. So you run the system live in 1 or 2 environments. You monitor for blind spots, you tweak the rule thresholds, you make sure your CAFM and payroll integrations are working smoothly, you answer questions from staff. And by the end of this phase, you typically see a 50 to 80% drop in unverified hours at those test sites. Operations at those sites should start to feel calmer and there'll be far fewer unknowns. Weeks 11 and 12 are where you complete the rollout and bed in your reporting. So you extend the rollout to more sites, enable full verified hours reporting across your portfolio, turn on your AI alerts, and generate your monthly KPI packs. So that's verified hours percentages, staff utilisation metrics, attendance compliance, labour cost variance, productivity, that kind of thing. And you begin sharing this evidence with clients in reviews and audits. They'll like seeing it. You document the before and the after for internal stakeholders so that people can see the impact you've made. By week 12, you've moved from a world of patchy, inconsistent time data to a fully verified attendance and task evidence system. And although you may still find yourself tweaking things for some weeks to come, you should immediately see a drop in supervisors chasing timesheets on a Friday afternoon and a much faster dispute resolution time with your clients. Now, to put all of this into a bit of real-life context, let me just finish by telling you about a real cleaning provider we worked with to eliminate the very problems I've described in this video. So this cleaning provider had mobile teams across multiple client sites. They had inconsistent visibility, a lot of complaints, and supervisors who felt like they were constantly reconstructing the past. The complaints were actually their biggest issue. Complaints came mostly from clients who were claiming that cleaners hadn't visited a particular room in a building, or sometimes that they hadn't turned up at all. So with their clients' permissions, our customers deployed gateways at all entrances on each floor and in key rooms where most complaints were coming from. These were the bathrooms in this case. So we gave each cleaner a Sense badge and we gave supervisors access to the Sense Presence console. They switched on automatic shift start and stop workflow, as well as room-level cleaning verification workflow, supervisor alerts for overdue rooms, and automatic evidence packs for complaints. Within a very short period of time, supervisors could see in real time who was where and which rooms had been serviced. It actually turned out that in most cases, complaints about cleaners not showing up were happening because cleaners were showing up earlier or later in the day than the end client had expected. And complaints about the bathrooms were actually more often due to disrespectful bathroom users. So cleaners were attending as requested, but this was not enough to stay on top of the mess that was being made, to put that quite bluntly. Now, either way, complaints that used to take hours to investigate were now being resolved in minutes by pulling up the evidence trail. And we actually went one step further with this client and installed door sensors in their bathrooms so that after so many uses, a new task was created and added to the nearest cleaner's badge, who would then pay that bathroom an extra visit. And this eventually reduced the number of complaints by 60%. And increase the value of the contract. The clients were happy to pay for the extra work because they could see the results that came from it. Now, our customers noticed the difference, their clients noticed the difference, audits went better, complaints dropped, and the whole operation felt more controlled. So Sense Workplace as a platform is designed to enable exactly this kind of shift, from unverified, manual, reactive operations to verified, automated, proactive operations. We built this platform for organizations who run dispersed, mobile, or hard to monitor teams, particularly in facilities management, but also in other frontline heavy industries, including hospitality, healthcare, and logistics. The purpose of Sense Workplace is to give you reliable, defensible evidence of the work that your teams do without burdening staff with more admin, and without requiring supervisors to become full-time data detectives. So if you want to see how this might work in your own environment, maybe that's room-level task verification or simply automatic timesheets based on actual entry and exit times, then a member of our team will always be happy to walk you through this. But even if you don't use our platform or you don't plan to use our platform, hopefully this walkthrough has given you a clear picture of what unverified hours look like, why they matter, and how you can start eliminating them from your operation, whatever the technology is that you choose to reach that goal. Thanks for sticking with me through the full walkthrough of this video. You can download the PDF version by clicking the link below, or if you want to book your own free walkthrough with one of my friendly colleagues, I'll add a link to their calendars below too. Of course, to learn more, you can just visit senseworkplace.com Thanks for watching.